with a, sorry, with a, sort of want to set this up with a brief talk on how you can, in essence, archive what you're doing, as you're building a model, and photograph the finished models, keep them around, and then either use those photographs to submit to magazines or send to other people on the internet and get just as much detail and character out of the model as possible. Because you can pretty much take a camera, point it at a model, and record something, but getting something that really has the contours and the shape, the shadows and everything is just, it's doable. Especially now with digital cameras available, you can see instantly where you're going. If you're working on a highlight and it's just too bright, or your lighting's one way or the other, you can always correct it. If I start to taper off, tell me to speak up. For the most part, I'm going to talk about photographing indoors because there's consistency to that, where you could set up a rig in your model shop about like a spray booth kind of a thing, that kind of size. And it's there. You can just walk over with a part you're working on or an engine or whatever, take a quick picture, walk away, know you've got it, and it hasn't been a big deal. It's just all dialed in. I can also talk afterwards about shooting outdoors, which is a good way to go. Cars are mostly outdoors. There are great advantages and disadvantages to shooting outdoors. The light is constantly changing, as well as what they call the color temperature of light. In the middle of the afternoon, the light is very blue, and towards the end of the day at sunset, the light gets very warm. There's a sweet spot in the middle, and it's pretty much impossible to hit it. So that's why I've come up with a very simple indoor setup that you can work on. And it's also pretty inexpensive. So let me just go to that. Okay, let's go here. Okay.
Get your pointer back? Yes. Okay.
Okay. This is the beginning of the setup. I set this up in my studio in New York, and this is just off to the side in the studio. My studio manager and assistant, as I was photographing this, constantly made jokes at what I was doing and had doubts that this would work, but they were really pretty surprised. You need to start off, and as I'm going, ask questions. Ask them now, and we'll have questions afterwards, and then we can get into broader parts of the photography end of it as to why my printer at home doesn't work, or why do my prints look so lousy when everything on the screen looks great. Start out with a sturdy base, something that's not going to shake or rock. I have some wooden sawhorses. Of course, the table works well. It's great if you can set this up in an area where it can just say set up all the time. And you can just walk your camera in. If you have a tripod, just drop it on and you're ready to go. Sawhorses, I have a sheet of plywood down there. And then on top of that is a sheet of Formica. It's just simple white Formica that you can get at Home Supply store. It's not the kind that's laminated to particle board. It's just a thin sheet. You could also go to an art supply store and get a 30 by 40 card. Start out with something light in color. Avoid using, probably saw a lot of shots on red. That red is going to bounce right back into the car no matter what color it is and influence it. So simple color. You can also, this is a 4 foot by 4 foot sheet of Formica.
What happens if you have a light colored car?
I can show you how to work with that as we go. Remind me in about 2 more frames, once the car's on the set. If you go to a Home Supply store, they generally sell this in 4 by 8 sheets. If you go to like a Lowe's or a Home Depot or any lumber yard, they probably have a piece that's cracked. White's the most common color. You can get a real good deal on the cracked piece and cut it. You can just cut it with a mat knife and snap it. And what I've done, clamped it down. You can see the C clamps, 2 A clamps on the side, and I put a box behind it, curved it up to make what will be the back wall of the set. Now, there's a camera on a tripod in the shot, and that's only here at this point just to kind of give you guys an idea where the camera's going to go.
That's a matte finish.
Right, it's a matte finish. The product number on the sheet of Formica is 949. I'm going to give you, all you guys, I'm going to give you my phone number. You can always give me a call if you got any questions. Again, you can even just go to an art supply store and get a piece of white board. The nice thing about this is you can just wipe it off. It'll last forever. So that's it. You have your back sweeped up. And that'll be the background. Let's go to the next shot. Light source. If you shoot outside, like whenever I have to shoot a car, an exterior shot of a car, traditionally for years, they were shot at either sunrise or sunset. And there's a point in time, it's about a 30-minute window, when the sun is behind the horizon, but it's lit up the whole sky. And you've got just this great dome of gorgeous light. And you shoot your car then. And you basically overexpose it slightly so it looks more like it's in daylight rather than slightly dark. It's kind of impractical for models, and who wants to really get up at 6 in the morning anyway to go photograph a model when you can just have a setup like this and go for it. There are two stands there that are holding up this lighting rig. The two stands I got at an old junk shop. They're Fisher stands that are used in science labs. You can also use coffee cans, anything to support a rig. And this rig is a 16 by 20 picture frame. That's the black part. And inside is a translucent material. You can use tracing paper. You can use a white shower curtain lining. You can also go to a store. Pardon me? It'll work pretty well, yeah. I've never tried it. If you can get a piece that's big enough, a sheet big enough, that would work.
So just diffuse the light is all you want to do?
You're just diffusing light, something that's, for the most part, non-flammable. You can also, if you're really into this and it doesn't cost much, if you're near a major city, there's a store called Calumet, C-A-L-U-M-E-T. They're also online. They sell professional supplies as well as all kinds of film. They can sell you a sheet of this for, I don't know, $5 to $10. And that stuff is flame-proof and it'll last forever. If you use other materials like tracing paper, it'll probably yellow in time, which you'll all of a sudden wonder, why are my shots getting warm toned? That could be it. So you take that, you take an old picture frame, or one thing that really works well, and I didn't have one in the studio when I shot this, is an old metal window screen. Like the ones that go in the window, just pop out the screen, and you've got a very thin, sturdy, rigid frame. And you just find a good way with clamps or whatever to mount those between the two posts, and you have your diffusion material. If I shoot a full-size car in a studio, we're basically on a full scale doing the same thing, setting up a big scrim or whatever. Now then you need a light source. It's a $6 lamp from a hardware store. And in there right now there's either a 75 or 100 watt, just average everyday GE bulb.
Oh, not photo bulb, just a regular?
Right, that's just a regular bulb. You can also buy a photo bulb from a photo store, which is a slightly different color temperature. Tungsten light, which this is warmer. Daylight is cooler. If you're using a digital camera, you just dial in for whatever light source you're using. If you're using a film camera, you have to buy the proper film for that. So for this, you would buy a tungsten film, which is designed for artificial light. So you rig your light up from the post, and I've kept the lighting open. What you'd want to do is build a box around the light so this light isn't spilling out across the room. You want to confine it. You don't have to, and actually I was pretty successful with this, with just letting the light spill out. So I guess I mean, are there any questions on that? Because I mean, that's a pretty complex thing.
Because the
On the
tungsten's
bulb.
only for slide, yeah.
You can buy it for negative film. It's pretty hard to find. Yeah. Slides are a good way to go if you're going to submit them to a magazine, because they're scanned directly as a slide. If you're using a negative, there's a lot more room for interpretation. They don't really know where the negative should be to make it look right.
Do you use the same basic setup for digital?
Yes. Yeah, as a matter of fact, this works. I shot this with a digital camera in the studio. Just a real basic, simple little Nikon. And I just, digital is great when you're doing this stuff, because in the old days, you would shoot something and you never knew what you were getting. You had to wait for the film to come back and you go, oh, wow, look at that dust clot on the hood. You can't see that stuff easily. With digital, you can just put the picture up on your screen and you know what you've got.
When you're shooting with digital, do you not have to worry about the tungsten light bulb color differences?
Well, in a sense you do, no matter what. What you have to do with your digital camera is pick that setting. It'll have a setting for tungsten, usually one for fluorescent, as well as a daylight setting. And a lot of cameras have one that you can dial in. If you're getting light, if it just starts looking a little bit off. I was talking to someone last night. I think he was using tungsten light, and he was getting very blue images. He just needs to dial in his camera maybe a little bit. Or there's also an issue with room light. When you go to shoot at this point, I've left the lights on in the room so you can see the set, but you should turn off all the lights in the room. I have this set up down in my workshop, and every time I go to take a picture, I have a TV down there, so I have to turn off speed, which is constantly running, speed channel. Turn off all the lights, and then you don't have reflections in the car. Because now we get to this part.
Oh.
Yeah. Go ahead. Pardon me?
You said tungsten film. What film speed?
Film speed. You should try and be 100 to 200 is a good place to be. 400 is okay.
100 better, or?
100 would be better. There's more clarity.
What kind of cameras did you get and what you can stay away from? Price range?
Wow, it's all over the map. When it comes to digital cameras, it depends on what you're going to do with it. If you're sending pictures on the internet, just going back to other model guys, probably any digital camera will do a pretty decent job, because the internet is very forgiving. If you're making prints, you're going to need a higher quality. You're going to have to go to at least 3.5 to 5 for the digital. Right? Are you?
My minimum's 3.
Your minimum is 3. Yeah.
I prefer 4 of them.
Right. And even 3 when you're talking about making a print with your Epson printer, that makes a good 5x7 print. Mathematically, the numbers work out that way. If you're up to about a 5 megapixel, I think that puts it in about the 8x10 range. And that's when you're not doing any cropping to the image.
You ever tried film under 100?
Yes. Yeah, pretty. It does. The lower the number, the more. Right. And the lower the number, the more light you need. But you're able to enlarge the picture much more and have great clarity, the lower the number. They used to make it went down to like 25 or so. And you could make a huge print with it, and it looked great. Right, yeah. Remind me. I think it's the next frame. We have to get into that. There's the issue of the background. You have a white surface, and you can go into an art supply store, and for $30 or $40, you can buy a gradated surface, and it goes from light to dark. You can get it from like white to black, or white to gray, or to blue. But it's not really necessary. What you can do is set up what they call a gobo, which it's called a gobo, G-O-B-O. It's a film term, like a Hollywood term, and it's a California term. It's called a goby in New York on the East Coast, which means that it goes between. It's an object that goes between the surface that you're photographing and the light. So that black, that's a black piece of foam core. Black on both sides, you could use a black card. And it's sitting on 2 wooden blocks. And what that does is it creates a dark background, so if you have a light-colored car, a car with a light roof, you're going to get some good separation. The camera's a little higher for that to be effective, but that's where we're headed with this. Imagine the camera a little lower, and you've got great separation. Of course, if you're doing dark-colored car, you go to a white background. You could just pull that away, and it's instantly white. Now, what can happen here, and like I was saying, building a box around the top of that to keep the light from spilling out in the room is a really good idea. Got to keep the room lights off. Go, Jim.
Is there, assuming you have your Gobo out of there, do you ever require other backlight besides additional backlighting?
Yes.
You do.
Yeah. For this simple setup, I'm trying to do a one-light deal.
Okay.
You figure sunlight's one light.
Mhm.
And everything that sunlight does is based on reflections or other things that influence it. So, yeah, you can definitely use a
In the
backlight.
theater, we had to backlight everything, or it looked horrible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in theater, you're trying to draw a lot more depth to it. You know, you're using colored lights to create a sense of depth. And here we're trying to keep, the other advantage is if you have one light source, you also have one color temperature of light. You're not going to get like weird colored backgrounds and things. Yeah. So this is a car I built for a how-to article that was in Scale Auto not too long ago. But this is not the setup I used. I used a very similar setup. I use what's it called, like a factory-made light. It's just a big dome, and it has the light source goes on the top. I use the strobe, and it's got diffusion material on the bottom of it, so it's all encased. Same principle as this. So I think the light on here is starting to look pretty good. So we're headed down the right road here. And at this point, once you get the car on the set, don't put the car on the set until you've got your rig up, because you don't want to drop anything on it. Yeah, I've only dropped one model in the thousands I've shot. At this point, the model goes in. This is where you set up your camera. Because what you want to do before you even get the camera there is just put your head down and take a look at what you're doing, rather than start to frame it with the camera. So you get the camera in. And in the previous shot, you can see the side of this car is a little dark. You can see the metal letters, metallic letters are dark, and as well as just the side panels are a little deep. But what you've got is the top light, the top plane, is beautifully lit. The roof, the top of the hood, and the spoiler in the back. And that's really what this rig is about. We're starting to draw with light, just like as if you're doing an illustration. You're paying attention to all the parts and everything that's going on. So it's time to put a fill card in. So I've lowered the camera angle a bit, so it's looking pretty good, and I put in a fill card. Don't want to lose the shape of the body. You want to draw that side panel that it comes down and get that clean break where it sweeps down just under like the Y in Grumpy. It's, on a car like this, it's not too bad. If you have like a 68 Dodge Dart, the break in that body is really tough to get. So this is pretty forgiving, but you do it with a fill card.
What are you making your fill card out of? Is it another piece of the same Formica?
No, but you could use a piece of Formica
Yeah,
because it's
the same matte finish Formica you made your sweep out of?
it works really well. You can. The nice thing about that is if you're using these over a couple years, the color doesn't change. You can get go to an art supply store and just buy a clean white card. It makes a great fill card. In time, it'll get dirty, and the color will start to get warm and change, and you won't have the consistency. What I've used here, instead of a white fill card, it's called Windstone, and it's available at most art supply stores. It's a dull silver card. I'll show you a picture of the front of it in a minute. The nice thing about it is it doesn't reflect too much of the light, because you want to get a big broad source of light coming in on the side so you can light. And you can see how it's a little blown out in the back fender, still a little dark in the front fender. You can also see how the gold letters on the door are well lit. but I think it says Jenkins Competition above the back wheel. That's also gold letters, and that's not lit. But what you started to do here is bring in this card and you tweak it a bit, and it's leaning against a block, a wooden block. I have a bunch of them that I've cut up that are painted black, because everything around the set you want to just keep it dark so it doesn't reflect in. If you use coffee cans, paint them black. I use a lot of fun tack to hold things in position so that they don't fall over on the model. And there's a knob of fun tack between the block and, let's see if we can lighten this up. I wonder if this will work. Hey, that'll work. You can see into the back of the card there. You can see the block. Card's leaning against it. You got to think of the car in a sense like a chrome Kleenex box sitting there. It's got 3 reflective sides. The top light lights the top. You dial that in first. Then you start to work the side of the car. Because in a way, the side, even though it's very subtle, it's one of the most crucial because you want to get as many of those shapes and facets. It's like lighting a diamond ring. You want to get as much detail going on in there as possible. And there's a thing, it's angle of incidence equals angle of reflectance. So if you've got light coming down from the top, and that card's at 45 degrees, it's going to hammer the light right back into the side of the car. As you tilt it at 42 degrees, you're going to shoot the light up too high. If you tilt it down, you're going to shoot it down into the, if you stand it up too much, you're going to shoot it down into the surface. So you just lean that card back and forth.
See the changes in the card just with that?
Yep. And what you do is you just have to sit there and analyze it. You've got to say, okay, this car has type on the side of it. I've got to light it, or I'm losing a body panel. Which is more important? Which do I want to keep? You know, you can't always get everything. And as well, this is also crucial for lighting the wheels. Now, the one thing you can do is, let's say you get a card like this dialed in. You can then set up some small cards. You can get wire and wrap them around a block or whatever and get this like snaky thing sticking up, and then put a little card, probably like 3, 4 times the size of a postage stamp. And you can bring that in and just float it in just out of frame. Keep everything just out of frame, but as close as you can. And then just find out where that point is, where you get that angle of incidence equals angle of reflectance. You can get that Jenkins Competition to come in just right. Or you can get like a front wheel to stand out and really glow. I like to shoot cars as low as possible because I think that's the way we really see them. You know, if you shoot them too high, it looks like a model. A lot of cars, I think, deserves to be shot at a lower angle. I think there's a presence that certain cars have, like a Duesenberg, that if you see one and you walk up to it, that car has got just a massive presence from the front that a low angle, it just takes it even that much farther. Lens-wise, when you're starting out, I jump around a lot. Lens-wise, shoot with the most telephoto setting you can. If you have a zoom lens on your camera, or just use a normal setting. You don't want to start out really, you just don't want to get a lot of distortion, you know, if you're experimenting with a wide angle lens. Although I think wide angle lenses really give a car a pretty cool look. Yeah, like a 28 or even a 35. No, you'd use the 70. Yeah. And when you're, we'll get to the shooting part in a second. Okay. And again, we really haven't gotten to the camera yet. You know, we're still just working on lighting. So let me just go back for a second. Okay, so we've got the top. We had the side somewhat dialed in, but I've just left it this way now just so we can get a better view of the car. If you look at it, the headlights right now are dead. There's no sparkle, there's no character. And on a car, headlights, I think, are crucial. You know, they've really got to glow. You know, of course, if it's a car with a lot of chrome on the grille, you really got to get it to show up. I know we're a little far back, but you can see better now that the lights have probably a bit too much light going into them. But I've added a card on the front side. And again, angle of incidence, the light's coming down, and you're just popping it right in. That's a card that's basically mirror finish. You can also use a mirror, like little mirrors you can buy in a drugstore are great. They're like 2 by 3 inches. They're great for photography like this. They have about a 92% reflection rate, a mirror does. I like these mirrored, just from an art supply store, mirrored cards. They're about as bright as they can be. They have about an 80% rate, and they're pretty good for grills and front ends. Foil works well too. Yeah, I mean, a lot of this is experimentation, and if you're doing a series of models, just one after the other, you end up switching cards, and some things just work better than the other. So at this point, you've got pretty much the car dialed in lighting-wise. I didn't fine-tune it completely. But that's where we're at 8 at this point. You can set up the camera and frame it. Or you could set it up even if you just want to use that to look through for viewing how the fill cards are working out. And if you have a digital camera, you can take pictures as you go and just analyze things. I think taking pictures of models has helped me a lot in being better as a model builder, because there are a lot of things you see when you take a picture, especially as you go, that can help improve the model. This is pretty much a out-of-the-box Camaro, and you can't really see it here, but the molding, or the drip molding that runs horizontally across the top of that side window has a funny angle on it, and it's, of course, probably bigger than it is in scale, and it doesn't have the kind of detail it does in scale, but what it does is when you foil it or put your chrome on it, it creates this incredibly ugly reflection back on the glass because the glass is recessed. So you take as you're taking your pictures, or even if you're building the car or whatever, you start to see things like that. You can maybe pre-visualize that as you're building a model, where you can say, this kit's going to just give me trouble in that area. If you're scratch building, I built a flathead motor a while back, and it had, a couple dozen head bolts on it. And I set it under the light, and I banked that light right off the head bolts. And I could tell which ones are twisted or crooked or weren't perfect. Because you want all those to have a consistent rate of reflection. So if they're all, like a light gray, that's cool. If you get one that's a little dark or a little light, you got to edge it down or whatever just to flatten it out to make it match the rest. Yeah. So at this point, my studio manager and assistant are pretty interested in what's going on because the lighting was looking pretty decent. The other thing is if your camera has, I'm just going to back up. I'm real good at that. If your camera has a removable strobe unit, or if there's one available for your camera, you can substitute that for that $6 hardware light and put that above your set. And that gives you a great deal less heat on the set. There is one writer for Scale Auto that about 10 years ago melted a hood on his car with a setup like this.
I've done that.
Yeah, yeah.
Why is the suspension system back?
Yeah, that's the worst thing. It's like, wow, this is a moving picture. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Oh, yeah.
If you're using a strobe for your light source, though, isn't it harder to set up all the...
Yeah. You're still going to need some sort of a tungsten light source to just to view it and to be able to focus. Yeah.
Okay, and then
Like a modeling light. Thank you.
Then you shut the tungsten light off and substitute the
Right.
strobe for the shot.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you take it with a slow shutter speed if you set up right without the strobe?
Absolutely.
Without
Yeah. Yeah.
No problem with that at all?
Nope, shouldn't be a problem, especially on digital camera.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm taking pictures in dark barns with very slow shutter speeds,
Mhm.
and you get them, like a daylight in there.
Yeah.
If you just have to be, it has to be on a tripod.
Right. Yeah, that makes all the difference. You have to have your at this point, the camera's set up. You really have to lock the camera down. If you have carpeting on the floor, you might get a little shake in that. Just walking around, you've got to be still when you take the picture if you're using tungsten. If you have a concrete floor, you're in really good shape. If you don't have a tripod, most cameras take a 1/4 20 thread. You can take it and clamp it to the back of a chair or something, or set up your own rig. I'm just telling you, this doesn't have to be expensive. You can spend $80,000 or $100,000 to set up a rig to do this, and you don't need it. So this is just an overhead shot, just to show you guys. The black line up above is the frame. Above it is the diffusion material. That's the silver card, or it could be a white card on the right side. Ooh, I can do this. And here is a mirror card. So you can pretty much run, anywhere between a dull silver to a mirror as fill. And again, you're using one light source. If you start to use two, it gets really tricky and can be really ugly. It's not a good way to go, especially if you're going to get double shadows possibly. In the studio, we could use 40 lights to light a car like this full size. But the idea is you make it look like it's one light, just like it's sunlight on a slightly, I won't say overcast day, because if you're shooting outside on an overcast day, the light is very flat. You have to have a little sparkle and spunk to it. Yeah, it's great if you have like a day where there's just a slight amount of overcast and just a pinpoint of light coming through, because then you can also get a pinpoint of light on the car, which if you look at any illustrator and how they illustrate, they usually put a little highlight, a bright one, along with some other smooth highlights. And the other thing is they usually want to draw light. And this car isn't the best example. I could show you some of the others on that slideshow. But you want to draw a highlight, if you can, from here all the way back, because it makes the car look longer and lower, which is usually the look for a car. At least this is kind of the traditional advertising route to go.
I noticed on some of those slides you had the whole fender.
Yeah, I can go back to those, because I'm sure there are going to be some questions on those, because those are some pretty cool models, some Wingrows, some Sands. Yeah. So at this point, the camera's set up. And I think this is the last one in our group, isn't it? Yeah. We'll just leave it there. The camera's set up. You're ready to take a picture. What by ever means, if it's conventional film or digital, use the meter and the camera. What the meter sees is middle gray, halfway between white and black. And if you have a card or something that's a middle gray that you can put in there, let the camera read that middle gray, you'll know you're going to get a good exposure. Right now, you're probably getting a pretty good average if you think of what's in the frame. A fair amount of white and a fair amount of black, not a lot of gray. It'll probably automatically meter it okay. When I'm working, we have to go around the whole set with a meter and just check a lot of different things and sort of interpolate all that. For this, you go for it. The beauty of digital is you just push the button and see what you get. And if you don't like it, you just adjust it. And you can do that in the camera. The key thing is to make this look more like a full-size car and not a model is knowing how a camera works. There's shutter speed and f-stops. Shutter speed is the duration of the time the shutter is open, and the f-stop is the amount of light that's let into the camera. And there's an iris in the camera, and you have to have that iris as small as possible, and that's usually a setting that's about f16 or f22, to which there's a little chant called hocus pocus bogus focus that is often chanted when we're shooting models. Just because you want to get, and at f16 or 22, you're getting hopefully the front fender to the back fender tack sharp. If physically the camera won't do that at its lowest aperture, back the camera up a little bit. You may have to crop into the frame, but you're going to get more depth of field, more ability to get the front and the back in focus. You can also take the car and just turn it a little more sideways. With professional cameras, you have the ability to, most focus is pretty flat in the camera like this on a conventional camera. You can actually take the focus and tilt it like this right down the side of the car. So you can get the front and back in focus and have that advantage. Don't have it with most cameras.
If you don't have
Exactly.
a digital camera, just go ahead and bracket it, get it in the middle, and then
Yep.
one back, one speed, and then go forward and then
Exactly. Bracket it and take notes. That was always the way to go for years. It was like, okay, so you set up a rig like this, you make some changes, you shoot some film, you take it to the same lab, you shoot the same film. I recommend Fujifilm. At this point, fair amount of professional photography, and not as much as you think, is done digitally. It's still mostly film. Most professional photographers in large cities use Fujifilm. It's a clean film. With all respect to Kodak, they just aren't doing it anymore.
AGFA has a new one out that's supposed to be good for all lights.
Yeah,
Just read about it
that's right.
last week.
Yeah, there's a new AGFA film that's very good. It's a great company. It's much harder to find, and even in New York City, it's tough.
So if
Yeah.
you get a Kmart anywhere, everybody has Fujifilm.
Yeah, just go to Kmart. Yeah.
Go to Costco and buy giant sleeves.
Yep.
It's cheap.
There you go. Take notes. Remember your f-stop, your lighting, and just build a consistency for yourself. And just keep this set up on the side. You may have to tear down your spray booth, but who needs that, right? I have one of these set up in my workshop that's similar to this, as well as I can always take something to the studio and they can all kid the boss about it. Shooting a little model car, huh? Yeah. Let's go over my notes real quick. Tripod, digital studio, camera instructions. I'm not going to go over camera stuff because it comes with an instruction book. And other than f-stops and shutter speeds, if you guys have questions, I'm going to give you my phone number. You can always call me. I'll be happy to talk to you all weekend. Yeah, but you really kind of got to go through the instructions. The only thing that's crucial is just dial that f-stop so you get all the depth of field you can. That way it doesn't look like one of those really bad model railroad shots. So,
I've seen some good ones, though.
yeah, right.
How much flexibility do you have with the placement of the camera left and right here? See where those, it looks like if the camera moves left a little bit and lower, you could have quite a bit of
Yeah,
area
absolutely.
to the right of it without
Yep.
getting that reflective.
Well,
surface.
that's a nice thing. If you have room to make a 4 foot by 4 foot wide set, you can move the camera around a lot. The beauty of shooting models, and why that's as much as I love models and photography, when you're shooting a real car, and you have to move the car, you go have coffee for a while while the guy moves the
You have
car.
the lights and
Yeah.
everything.
And then you worry about him knocking some lights over or whatever. With this, you can just move the car, give it a tweak. A couple things to consider: if you have posable steering, the attitude of the front wheel is important. There are a lot of theories about that. If the wheel is turned to the right, the car is just going off into wherever. If it's turned towards you, maybe it's more intimate. Advertising in Detroit are just, I love meetings because it's so funny. There are all kinds of things that goes on. If you're ever in with a salesman and he's just being really obnoxious, and you say, in the brochure, the car that I'm thinking about doesn't look like this one. The one in the brochure sits about 2 inches lower. It's because when we shoot cars, a lot of the time we bag them with water or strap them down so the car sits a little lower. A lot of the theory is, well, that's the ride height when you have 4 people in the car and that kind of thing, but it gives the car a better look. Pardon? Sorry?
Their bodies work.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
What about the shadow underneath it? Are you trying to get that soft or distinct, or, because if you put these angle the cards in there, that you might get some highlights, but you're gonna diffuse that shadow underneath too, something like Photoshop.
Yeah, you can use Photoshop. No, the beauty of this lighting rig is, and remember, you've seen that light is about, if that's a 16 by 20 frame, that light's about 12 inches above it, and let's say it's 14 inches from the surface, it's out of camera frame. As that light source gets farther from that diffusion material, keeping the diffusion constant, the shadow will get harder edged. As it goes closer, it's going to get softer edged. So you can work with that. Now, I like to see a soft shadow because I think it offsets all the other harder edge on the cars. these images look really awful up here. The shadow has a lot of depth to it. I mean, you can see it's a gray, just a nice middle gray shadow. Also, that gold band across the top is really not there. I don't know why. I guess it's just a projector. Also, when you're shooting a car, if you get a little lower, you're going to get you're going to get show-through. You're going to see white behind the car. That's instantly going to do something to the image. And what it's going to do is it's going to tell you that car's sitting even higher off the ground. If you can avoid that, it makes the car look lower. It's just the show-through. Imagine if you're viewing this scene and you move either your head or the camera lower, you're going to start to see underneath the car, and you're going to see some white background behind it. That's going to make the car look high.
Would you want the center of the lens to be about even to where the center of your eyes would be on the real scale car? Like on that car, your eyes would be about that high above the roof, right?
Right.
So in scale, you'd be that high above the roof. So you would want the middle of the lens to be about that height to give you the prototypical angle on the body? Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I always like to be at the height I would be is if I was approaching the car on level ground.
Right.
At least as a starting point.
So that would be
Yeah.
just so the camera would be just slightly higher than the roof of the
Right.
car.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to go higher, especially for an engine shot or something like that. As you go lower, it's all up to you. I shot Randy Durr's Camaro, which I'll bring up again in a minute, from the back, because the back of that car, back of a '69 Camaro is it's just a big thing, And when you get down and you shoot up at it, I think it really says a lot about the car. You had a question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Is it traditional to shoot the car in that position with the front and the lower left and the tail and the upper right? Commercially?
Pretty much, yeah. There's always been a theory for printed images of automobiles that they point inward. We read left to right generally. If you point it out, it's kind of leaving the page. It's like an old theory, like whenever you see a watch ad, it's 10 minutes, 10:10, yeah. That's because the watch is smiling.
I've seen pictures of cars exactly the opposite way around them when you're wanting to emphasize a feature of the car that shows better on the right rear quarter.
Right. Yeah.
The other thing too is if
Right,
you,
it is fairly unusual.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, most magazine editors, if you submit images and any of them are pointing to the left, they're just going to go in the can. Greg?
that's what I said,
Yeah.
try and do both shots, do both right and left.
Yeah.
Because that, depends on if you have a left leading page, you might want it leading left,
Right.
right in.
But for the most part, you look for a shot that leans in, right?
It depends on what part of the page it's going to be on.
Yeah.
If you want to then capture features in the back of the car, you have a very pronounced back of the car, would you then just square it off and just shoot the back? Or would you still want to do a 3/4 angle shot and feature the back of the car?
Sorry, Jim.
All right, let's go into the car then. For something very pronounced, you wanted to get features in the back. You just
Right.
had some customer something, and you made a boat tail speech or something,
Right.
and you wanted to really capture the back of the car.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be better than to square it off and shoot the back dead square, or and not at a 3/4 angle, or shoot it both? Yeah, I guess.
It's if you got time, shoot it both ways, and then just edit later, because there's a lot of stuff that you see it on the set and you go, wow, this is really working, and you get it back and you go, boy, it doesn't cut it. But then there's something else, like the back view, straight on may work. The other thing that's really good with photography is your building. I'm a real stickler for models that are square, especially in scratch building. I photographed a lot of models, and there are a lot of builders that just have stuff that's all wacky. But when you see a model and you line it up, especially an early car where you can get the fenders, the headlights, and you can sight right down that strip that divides the hood as it comes up, and it's square. It's just, as a photographer, it's breathtaking. It's good as photographing any female model I've ever photographed. It's just like, this is really good, and you learn a lot about modelers that way. You learn who just builds. I'm going to go to some of the some of these other images here. How do I do that? What do we do? Let's click here. Let's go to this. Let's go to this slideshow. This is a mix of images here. Here's a back view, Jim.
Yeah. I have a question about that photograph in particular I wanted to ask you about getting more light in the,
Yeah.
you want to light the bottom corner more maybe, or is that, or is
You
that
could.
on purpose you want it dark like that, or
Yeah. Well, let's see if I can bring this over. Come on.
maybe it's just
It's already
the way
full
it's
frame.
projecting?
Okay, we're going to leave it.
Light.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, on this
Yeah.
rear view, I was really just, this lighting was set up to do a side view, which I have on there. You can see the reflection of the light from above. It's not a very nice reflection, but it's what happens. I wanted to keep a lot of drama in it, just to show the top, because there's really nothing graceful or good looking once you get down below the license plate. And there is a lot of detail in this image. You can actually see the right tire, even on this screen. There's a fair bit more. This is a square car. I think this is Manuel Olive Sanz, one of his later cars. Is that Matthew? Do you agree with me on that? You think that's one of his? Yeah. Beautiful car. You look at this stuff, though, and I lined this shot up with a grid when I scanned this, and there are a couple things that are off. Between the vents and the taillights, they're just slightly out, but it's on a rounded body. You guys know how tough it is to get stuff that just lines up. But this car, front fenders to back fenders, other than that, it's bulletproof. The car is so square. But Jim, sorry. What you could do with this shot if you wanted detail, this has, you can see over here, right over there, there's a giveaway. That's a pretty bright fill card. And what that does is it just laps light around that fender, because I just wanted it on one side. The other side just goes dark. As a matter of fact, there's a real sloppy thing going on there, which you would see better. This is right down there. Some sort of a stand or something that was on the set that wasn't painted black. So with Photoshop, you could, or any of those, you can remove that kind of thing. A lot of people complain about the white highlight. There was an editor at Scale Auto for a while that thought that these should be banned. You need a highlight, probably not as bright as that. Again, this is a very contrasty shot. You need it to draw the shape. You need something bright in there, even if it's a pinpoint of light from outside. You've got to have something, a real clincher of a light. We'll go back. Anybody have any requests on any of these other images that you saw? Or any questions? Anything from, why is my printer so crappy, to what resolution should I use for my printer, or et cetera? Yes? On the model itself? On the paper? Oh, when it comes out of a printer. Most likely, I'm going to say gloss. It doesn't make a lot of difference. The most important thing is, what kind of a printer do you have? Is there one in particular? Okay. Printer-wise at this point, in the professional market, or at least professionals who buy amateur printers will buy an Epson printer. Epson really owns the market for quality printers. Second in line is Canon. And Canon right now has a printer that is superior to Epson. But, in 2 weeks that'll change, because they're basically, like everyone else, leapfrogging. Hewlett-Packard makes good printers. I don't have a lot of experience with them, but I don't know a professional that uses one. Most of the work I turn out, though, is either as a digital file on a CD or as film. I generally don't make prints for final art. When you print, your DPI, or dots per inch, should be about 300 DPI. If you're any less than that, you're sacrificing a good print. Make sure that you go into your printer profile and look at how that printer is printing. If it's printing at 740, that's probably not enough to make a great print. It should be at 1440 as a setting. Use the finest setting for a photograph, and you get the best print. Right now, you can go out and you can buy, I think for about $149, Canon and Epson have a photo quality printer that is finer grain, make an 8.5 by 11 print, finer grain than you will get in, like, even better than you'd see in Rodder's Journal magazine, the resolution of the image, or National Geographic. You can do such a fine print at $149 and just keep pushing the button and making more. It's amazing.
Are those scanners that'll print from slides or negatives or any good?
I think so. Yeah. Scanning is really the tough part at this point. If you have a sheet of film that's we don't use it much anymore, but if you can imagine one sheet of film, 8 by 10 inches, and that's your image. You can scan that on probably the world's worst scanner and get something decent out of it. If you have a tiny 35 millimeter image, most scanners can't enlarge that even to a 3 by 5 to make a decent printable image out of it. You've got to spend a lot of money to get a good scanner for 35 millimeter. It's just always disappointing for anything else. I'm sorry?
What scale car is that?
I can look it up. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, this car, what does it weigh, about 20 pounds or so?
Close to it.
Yeah.
Most of Manuel Sands, most of his later work was all one-fourth metal,
Yeah, whoops.
as was this one.
Yeah.
Is he in Italy?
He was in Spain, I think. Yeah, he passed away probably 5 years ago. Let me just bring this back here. Hang on, guys. I'm just going to go back to the...
Just as a side note,
Yeah.
sold for $80,000. The guy
Yeah.
who owns it paid $80,000 for it.
This car was probably the cleanest, squarest, if that's a word. I mean, you look at this and you start lining up the panels and the door joints and everything, and it's just gorgeous. You know, there's nothing tweaked or bizarre about it. It's just so beautiful. Oh, come on, how do we go back here? Just go back to the...
Apple II, I think.
Go to what?
Mac II.
Where? Why am I not going back? Whoops. There we go. More questions? Sure.
Sorry, the third photograph on the right, which is the overhead, which is the spyglass spotlight.
Oh, yeah.
Where exactly are the parts?
Oh, there's a little bit of a Hollywood interpretation there. Yeah. No, I threw those in. Those are from something or other. Yeah.
Oh, they're not really under that.
No, and this is all set. I mean, I pretty much set this up. This is, thanks.
That's a cool shot.
Yeah.
Now, what is the material used as the tabletop? Is that stainless steel or?
Yeah, that's actually you buy it in the same department you buy Formica, and it's brushed aluminum or brushed stainless. I can't remember which. You can buy sheets of it in home supply stores. You usually have to order it because it's specialized, but you can get chips. They do it in gunmetal anodized colors. I like the neutral. I think it's really kind of nice. It makes a good surface. It also, you can see how like the wheels reflect. It's always nice if you shoot something and get just a little reflection kicking back in, because it helps ground the car and give it some character. What else have we got here?
So was the light source the spotlight, or was that an additional?
Well, you know, about 99% of the time in photography, when you see an ad in a magazine and there's a light in there, it's not lighting the shot. You have to supplement that with something else. Like if you see a shot of a hotel room, and you know the lights, the desk lamp is on and everything. There's a lot of other light involved in that to really make it work. What are you laughing at, Judy?
We turned the light on, we hooked to like 40 different other lights, so it looked like when you came on, you turned the light on the set.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Yeah.
it was actually, you know, borders and all kinds of stuff going on.
Yeah, people say, how come it takes you all day to photograph, you know, a Tiffany diamond ring? You know, and it's like, it's probably the most perfect diamond. It's easy to light, but you can spend hours just tweaking all those highlights. Any requests?
How about some tips for photographing here at the show? Is there anything that we can do to make it better?
Yeah, it's tough. Probably the most important thing is these lens caps that hang on a string. I can't tell you how many of those I've seen where someone's hanging one of those over it and it goes boom, like a pendulum, and whacks into a nearby model. I've seen that. That's tip number one. It's hard. A lot of cameras are able to mix room light with flash, whether it's, they call it like a backlight or a fill-in flash or whatever. If you have a tripod, I think that's about the best setting if you can use that. Otherwise, use flash or use room light. The color's going to be strange. I mean, one of the issues is always color. You know, we go through a lot of trouble at work to give something the illusion that it's neutral. I mean, all these images I have here are really dialed in, and this projector kind of seems to screw it up. But yeah, color is a big issue. When you shoot a car at dusk, the temperature of the light changes. It gets warmer and warmer as the light goes down. And I have an assistant who stands with a meter that just measures color. And his responsibility is he just keeps clicking the button as we're shooting. In between each frame, he'll put in a filter that it's like a 3 or 4 inch filter, which he puts in front of the camera in different combinations to balance that light to a neutral. And that's the great disadvantage to shooting outside. I mean, you go outside in the middle of the day and you take a picture and it might be blue, it might be neutral, depending on how deep if you're in the shade. That could be a problem too. You also have to watch out for reflections outside as well as inside. You know, what you're going to get in glass and things like that.
Do you not recommend using the camera on the setup that you've shown us in the studio? Not using the flash on the camera? Cancel that?
Right.
Get large enough.
On the cover of a magazine. Let me just, one second, let me just, is there anything I'm missing? Yeah, just one last thing. If you're shooting film, make sure you bracket the shot, which means you keep, let's say, your shutter speed consistent, or no, keep the f-stop consistent. Stay at f16 or 22. Lock that in, and then shoot different shutter speeds, so you get lighter and darker exposures. Take notes. You can even, if you want, put a little card in the set next to your car and say what all the information is. Then you'll have that. You can come back and reproduce it over and over and over. Again, consistency. Get a pen. Anybody who wants to call me, call me at work. Number's 2. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Just leave your MasterCard number. 212-989-8181. And just say you're a friend, because if you say anything, if you use the word model, they might think that you are like a fashion model or a hand model, which is where their mind is at. Because my studio manager is kind of giving a hard time to some people in a funny way.
What's the name of the studio?
Douglas White Photography. And if you're in Manhattan, 5 West 19th Street, come by and say hi. Yeah. You guys are all like brothers to me, you know. It's like, this is such a great thing.
What's that? You don't have email?
212.
Yeah. DS White at OPTONLINE.
One more time?
Sure. OptOnline.net.
And your, spell your name W-H-Y.
YTE. Yeah, it's Scottish. We can't spell.
Take offense then, I'm Scottish.
There you go. .net. Yeah.
Can you get your phone number again? 212?
Yeah.